All right, welcome back to the Downline podcast. Really excited today to be joined by Sarah Eekhoff Zylstra, who I first got connected to about a year and a half ago through a really tragic event at our church at Harvest. But just a reminder that Downline podcast exists to equip Christ followers to faithfully walk with Jesus while pouring their lives into others. And I think today, as we talk about the history of social media, and then in a part two of how to actually combat that, it's really going to get down to the pragmatics of an area that so many Christians are struggling with and cultural struggles at large. So Sarah, hey, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, just a quick backdrop. I first kind of got acquainted you, wouldn't even say met you, I guess met you over email through Garrett Kell, who teaches Romans at Downline, after we had a tragic plane crash that took the lives of, several dear friends at Harvest. And you wrote a really gracious article. And so, I would love, because so many people that listen to this do go to Harvest, if you could just say a word to them. And I know a lot of people read that article and were really blessed by it. So from Harvest to you, I just want to start by saying thank you.
Oh man, I just was so I met you, Jamie, by staring at you on a live stream while I was watching you preach the Sunday after this, and
you're one of the few people that doesn't turn it off immediately.
No, I was riveted, and then I could not believe the service that you led, the message that you gave was spot on. It was darkness, but light in the darkness. And then the singing that your church was doing, and you could hear people crying, and yet they were singing, they were praising the Lord. Mm-hmm. The wife of the elder who was killed, I don't know if you remember, that was came and helped to lead worship that week. I was blown away. Yeah. Well,
thanks for even taking a notice, and we're excited because God did some things in that only He can do. Okay. Hey, tell our audience, I'm so excited to add your voice to the Downline community. Give the audience a 30,000 foot view of who you are and what you do and where you're currently living and your family and all that.
Yeah. So my name is Sarah. As you said, I grew up on the cornfields of Iowa, went to a college called Dordt University, which is literally named after the Synod of Dordt, where the 5 points of Calvinism were outlined, right? Tulip.
Oh,
yeah.
So you're not Reformed, are you?
Born into this, right? Went to Chicago with my husband, stayed there the last 20 years. We both went to graduate school, and I started working in journalism. I wrote for Christianity Today for a little bit more than a dozen years. And then last year, my husband and I, we moved our family to Kansas City, Missouri. Love it. I have been working for the Gospel Coalition now for about 6 years or so, and my job is to tell stories of where God is at work in the world. So to take that journalism background, to bring that rigor, to ask those questions, all the research, and look for places where God is doing something, places like Harvest, where God is doing something, and to write that down for His glory. And then if some people can be, edified and educated or inspired along the way, then praise the Lord.
Well, they definitely are. And I've always loved your writing and storytelling, and encourage our people to certainly, well, we have a lot of Gospel Coalition readers as part of our community, but if you're not, to go on and check those out. And our good friend, Sandy Wilson.
I do. He's my interim president right now.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. He's doing great.
Well, I had lunch with him not too long ago before we actually moved from Memphis out to Austin, and he is an absolute treasure.
He is. If we could keep him, we would, but he's a little older, and so I don't think he wants this to be his, fourth career or whatever.
I'll text him and say, Sarah says you stay or she quits.
Yeah.
Are we good on that?
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, by the way, why, as a Southerner, can I just ask, why do you love being cold?
We don't love being cold, but we also just don't love being hot.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, you're always trying to find the spot that's not too hot and not too cold, right?
Yeah, which I think is called California, except you got a lot else to navigate out there.
It's true. Yeah. So,
okay. Hey, if you have not heard or listened to Scrolling Alone, which is a podcast Sarah did, and then there's an article if you just Google Scrolling Alone Zylstra, you'll find it. That's really the backdrop of what I wanted to talk about today, because all of us have tasted the dangers of social media, especially now, Sarah, so I finished high school in 2001, college in 2005. So, for folks like you and me, I kind of praise God. This was not part of our upbringing, right?
Yeah.
Like not something we had to navigate, but we've got 20 years of research now that says, hey, this is not what we thought it was. So I'm going to let you kind of launch it. Can you give us a background of why you did that piece, kind of your heart behind it, and then start walking us through how we even got to this point?
Yeah, I totally can. I'm going to start by reading you. It's a little bit long, but this is from the Surgeon General, who last May said this. He said, the most common question parents ask me is social media safe for my kids? I think we're all asking that.
Oh, yeah.
The answer is we don't have enough evidence to say it's safe. And in fact, there is growing evidence that social media use is associated with harm to young people's mental health. Children are exposed to harmful content on social media, ranging from violent and sexual content to bullying and harassment. And for too many children, social media use is compromising their sleep and valuable in-person time with family and friends. We are in the middle of a national youth mental health crisis, and I'm concerned that social media is an important driver of that crisis, one that we must urgently address. Wow. Now, this is not the first time the Surgeon General of the United States said, hey, there's a mental health crisis among youth. We've been watching those numbers go up for a long time. But it was the first time that he made that direct link to social media. Like it's the first time he said, hey, we know why this is happening among our youth. A couple months later, attorneys from 41 states filed lawsuits against Meta, who is the parent company for Facebook and Instagram, charging, that those platforms target young users for profit and use manipulative methods to keep them coming back. And then a few months after that, the CEOs of Meta, Discord, X, Snapchat, and TikTok were called to testify before Congress. And that was earlier this year when Mark Zuckerberg stood up and for the first time publicly apologized to parents of children who had been harmed by his platform. So they had parents in the room whose kids had harmed themselves, maybe even killed themselves from interactions they had on social media. Yes, which makes you think, what is going on? Because when you think about social media, it's supposed to be something that is really light and fun and enjoyable, right? Just a way to connect with your friends. So the question I started asking was, how did it move from that to something that is so dark and dangerous that our Surgeon General is literally issuing warnings against it?
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. So let's talk about the story of social media. And it starts with Mark Zuckerberg, really. Back when he was a Harvard sophomore in 2003. One night he was a little bit irritated by a girl, and he was also just a little bit drunk. And so he was a computer whiz. So to blow off steam, he hacked into the Harvard websites, took all the pictures of all the kids, those pictures you take when you go to college, right? Your ID picture. And he put them up into a Who's Hotter game, right? So that it would pop up 2 pictures and you could vote which one was hotter, and that would pop up 2 more. And he called it face smash. It only lasted a couple hours before the school officials caught on and shut it down. But by then, 450 people had voted, not 450 times, but 22,000 times. So that made him realize, oh my word, we're onto something big here. A couple months later, he launched Facebook, where instead of Mark stealing your information, you could put up your own information. And then, as you know, he didn't go back sophomore year. Junior year, he was already, by the time he got to the fall, he had released it to Harvard, started releasing it to other colleges, and it was just growing like crazy. And then within a year or two, he released it to the whole world, and then it grew like crazy from there. So
I remember being in college when Facebook came out and thinking, y'all are all idiots. And I held that line.
Well, you were right, but you were the only one. And it's a little bit weird because Facebook wasn't the first one. Maybe you can remember back to like MySpace or Friendster. There were some other ones out there, and it wasn't the last, because you know how many iterations have come since then, from TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. The kids these days don't even use Facebook anymore. And yet the reason I'm still telling you about them is because they are the undisputed global king of social media. Of the 8 billion people in our planet, 3 billion of them have an active Facebook account. So 3/8 of the people in the world have a Facebook account. Isn't that crazy?
I had no idea.
It's a lot. So what are they doing? what I looked into is like, what are they doing that is making them so successful? Why are they so good at this? And the first thing that you come across when you're researching this is the news feed. So a long, long time ago, when you would first if you had made an account in college, you would be friends with Bobby, and you'd be friends with Caitlin, and you'd be friends with Jared. And you would, if you wanted to know about them, you went to their page, looked at something they had posted. Then you went to the other guy's page and looked what he had posted. Right. And then when you ran out of friends or you got bored, then you stopped and logged off and went somewhere else. And about 2006, Facebook staff thought, wouldn't it be great if we just put these, every time somebody had an update, we would put it into sort of like a cable news scroll. And it would just pop up. So you could go to one place and look at everybody, and it would be so convenient and everyone would love it. So they did do that. Nobody remembers this, that there's a huge outroar when they did it. Like, they had to hire security guards at the Facebook offices when this happened, because people were so furious. 1 million people were in a Facebook group that was against the news feed. They were so mad because it felt like you were being stalked, and it felt like you were being forced to stalk other people. Like, that's where our culture was in its mindset, right? Like, why are you taking what I was posting just for my couple friends who would come and look at me and put it on a stage for everyone to see, right? And now and you're making me look at everybody else's stuff too. It felt voyeuristic back when it was first introduced. And because it did change the experience in two substantial ways, right? One of them was like, yes, before you were saying things in public, but it was almost like being in public, like, I'm in a corner booth of a restaurant with you, and so I'm saying stuff to you. So yeah, we're in public, but we're just together in a corner booth. And now we're on a stage with a microphone. So I'm not just saying it to you anymore. I'm saying it to everyone. And the second thing, of course, it did was to reduce the friction. Like, if you're watching a football game and you have to get up and go in the kitchen every time you want more snacks to eat, what this did was to now it's like your mom is bringing you snacks and putting them on that coffee table right in front of you, and you never have to stand up. Of course, you're going to eat more snacks because they're just coming to you. That friction is all the way gone. So those are two ways that it changed. Mark Zuckerberg, by the way, he apologized for the way they rolled out the news feed, but he never rolled it back. And the reason was that he was on the back end, and he could see that the same people who were complaining about it were also using Facebook twice as much as they had before. Even though people were feeling voyeuristic, it was like a train wreck, right? Like, you can't look, I shouldn't be looking at this, but yes, exactly. Yeah. They couldn't look away. So that, and you see it in every platform since then. Everybody's got a news feed of some sort, and that's because it works. Yeah.
And I would say the mentality now is everybody wants to be seen. There's no sense of violation or voyeurism in that anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So where do we go from there?
Okay. So the next thing that happens is a couple years later, if we are going to be generous with our Facebook staff, and they've noticed that a lot of the comments are very small, and so there's stuff like great, or glad to hear it, or so nice to see that, or something that's really little. And they thought, or at least they tell us they thought, how could we get more substantial engagement in the comments? What if we just add a button that is like, and you can just push like and move on if that was it. And then in the comment section, wouldn't we have much more substantial conversations and engage with each other much more robustly? That's at least what they're telling us is what they were thinking. Okay. This, of course, did introduce an inadvertent gambling problem, because what it did was it put numbers on everything, right? So now I can see how many people like this. So if I am a young girl or a young boy or anybody, all of a sudden I'm getting graded on my social life. All my social interactions, I am getting a letter grade on. And not only that, but it is a public letter grade. So everyone can see, me included. I can look at my friend who is more or less popular than me, and I can judge myself far more easily than you could if it was just comments, right? That you can, it's very easy and quick to say, oh, it's like somebody posted your grades outside the classroom. You can very easily see who is where. The second thing is that you get a little hit of dopamine. You get one from a comment too, like, yay, someone's engaging with me. And you also get one from that like button. But since those likes are easy to give out, it only costs somebody a second of time, and they are uncertain. You have no idea when they're coming. You could get 10 in a minute. You could get 0 for a day. That uncertainty They show this I was just reading Jonathan Haidt this morning, like in lab animals, if there is an uncertain reward, it is more addictive than if there is a certain reward. So if you knew you were going to get a certain amount of likes, that would be less addictive to you than the, like, I don't know, let's check. Who knows? I just logged off, but maybe somebody else at this minute was, saying something to me or loving my post or putting a little fire emoji on my picture that I just put up. So like, ooh, I got to get back in there and look. So that is where the basically, I mean, it's the same psychology as slot machines in a casino. And so that then, especially if you're younger and your brain is not quite all the way developed yet and you're not quite as cynical as your parents, then you're just going to keep popping back in there all the time.
Well, yeah. And it's that's probably where you start to see a lot of the addiction come in, right?
Yes. So kids start spending more and more time on there. Exactly right. Because you get addicted to gambling too. It's the same, because then your brain gets used to those hits of dopamine all the time and you want more. So where 10 likes was awesome on your picture last week, or last month, now 10 likes feels normal and you want to have 15 likes or 50 or 100 or whatever level you're up to, even if it is thousands and millions. Your brain gets used to that where it is, it becomes normal. And you're like, well, I want to shoot for something a little bit higher.
And then the inverse of that's also going to be correct. The sinking that would come from not getting whatever that is, it would work in proportion to that, right?
Yeah. And you see a lot of kids turn into lurkers, right? And that's like a lot of kids don't even play the game. Well, they are playing the game, but they're not actively posting anymore. They're just opt out altogether. And they're just watching other people be online. Yeah. So,
there was interesting, I'd actually never thought about this in that article, but you talk about the detrimental, especially for young girls, on the idea of they're building a personal brand. Mm-hmm. And then the pressure it is to then make sure you're always on brand all the time. Yes.
So let's talk about how that could even happen to a person. So what came next after the like button is pictures. So in 2010, the iPhone 4 was released, and it was the first one that had a front-facing camera. And then a couple months later, Instagram was introduced to the world. And of course, a year or two after that, Facebook bought Instagram. But what you could do with Instagram was to take pictures, edit them with filters, and share them. And this turned social media from primarily a verbal game. It's hard to even remember, but you guys, before that, it was mostly words. People were mostly sharing words. Yeah, and now that changed things into sharing pictures, which did a couple of things. First of all, it upped the emotional connection, because when I can talk to you all day about a really cute puppy or a really adorable baby, but if I showed you a picture of one, you would connect. You'd be like, oh, that really is so cute. Like there's a change that happens inside of you. Also, it let more people play, because there's a certain number of people who are good with words, but almost anybody can take a picture of something cute with a camera, right?
That's a good point.
That's opened up the way for a lot more people to be good at this game. And it opened up the door for advertisers, because here's what advertisers already knew even before this. The human brain can identify a logo like those McDonald's arches or the Amazon Prime smile in 1/10 of a second. Before you can even read the word McDonald's, your brain has registered that it is McDonald's because you saw those arches. Yeah. So before, if you wanted to, so pictures open this wide up for advertisers. Before, if you were an advertiser and you wanted to sell a t-shirt for Taylor Swift or Tim Keller or something, you would have to think, where would my audience be? Maybe you would take out a television ad or a newspaper or a magazine ad or a billboard or some way you're trying to get yourself in front of your audience and say something about your product. But it's really inefficient, Jamie, because most of the people who look at that billboard don't care about Taylor Swift or Tim Keller or whoever you're trying to advertise. So you're just throwing it out there in the hopes that the couple people who like it will find you, like it, and then buy that thing. Well, now here's what Facebook is giving to you. If I want to sell a Taylor Swift t-shirt, I can say to Facebook, I know that she's going to be in Chicago doing a concert on such and such a date. For, 8 weeks before that, I want you to show my advertisement for this t-shirt to women who are between the ages of 13 and 45 or whatever. And I want that. And if they have said anything about Taylor previously on their page. I want this to show even more often. Like, think about all the way you can tailor your advertising. It's a dream. Like, your money is spent so much more efficiently than it ever could be before. It is, and you love it. And then if you can say to a woman who is really good at pictures and words on Facebook, hey, could you wear my t-shirt and say it's comfortable and say you can't wait to go to the concert and say you can't wait to wear this t-shirt to the concert and you hope other people do too, then think how, we trust our friends, right? So think how, and if you can find a popular girl who has a lot of friends, then you have just upped your chances of selling this t-shirt even so much more. So that's what started happening. And so now is when our Facebook, before people were going to connect with their friends and family, now you've got some women who are better at being on the stage. And I'm not throwing shade on them. Some women are using this money that they're getting from this to pay their kids' tuition or to be able to afford, to go on vacation or whatever it is that they're working at this job that they're doing. But their posts are increasingly becoming more beautiful. Their words are becoming more thoughtful. They are writing not just for their friends, they're writing for an audience. And then the rest of the people, me, right, who is not an influencer, is much more likely to be in an audience. Now I'm an audience member. Before we were friends, we were sort of on the same-ish level.
Okay, I'm with you.
Now we've split. Some people are influencers, some people are influenced. So that's kind of where that split has taken place. You can even see that in the numbers. A majority of Americans still say that connecting with friends and family is their number one reason to go to social media, but that is shrinking. Now it's much more to consume. They go to find products to buy. They go to find news. They go just for entertainment reasons, but they're not going for the stated purpose of social media, which is to connect with your friends and family, to have a social network.
Sure. Well, there's probably a growing, and you mentioned Haidt earlier, in Lost Connections, he cites loneliness as a root cause of depression, not just a symptom.
Yeah.
And I think I could be off on this, there seems to be a growing awareness that whatever I thought I was going to get from this relationally is not actually happening.
Yeah, I think that is true. I think that is definitely true.
Okay. I want to shift a little bit and let you state the problem with a lot of clarity. So you're a mom.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier about, you've got a high schooler now. My kids are all young, 10, 8, 6, and 4. So we're like the neighborhood Mennonites.
Yeah.
They don't, we've got a Nintendo Switch and fun stuff, but they've never had an iPad, a phone, whatever, anything. Let's talk from your expertise and just as a mom, specifically as it relates to young girls. Now, we're going to do another episode, Lord willing, later on about boys and video games and other things, but let's state the problem, you as a mom, to other parents, on the dangers of this for our young ladies. Yeah.
There's so many. We can talk about this for a really, really long time. I think that there's a promise. There are several promises that social media makes to our young women. And one promise that it makes is that you can be the influencer. You can be the one that people want to be like. You can be the one that knows stuff and is beautiful and is successful. You can be the one. You can be the god or goddess, if you will, right? You can be the one people follow. We literally use that language.
That's right.
And so I think that is a problem for our young girls. I think kind of paired with that is another false promise social media makes to our young girls is that they can know. When I ask girls why they can't get off of social media, even as they're telling me how much they hate being on there, it's because what if something happened and they didn't know about it, right? Like, what if they didn't know? And it seems to me that like those two things, the promise that you would know things, even things that you don't need to or maybe shouldn't know,
sure,
and the promise that you would be like God, are really old promises. We have heard those since the garden, right? Those are garden. That's the first promise, the false promise that was made. And so I think it's not gone. It's still there. And I think it's very seductive. And that's what I That's one of the main problems.
It's interesting when you say that, because I am not a Hebrew expert at all, but even in Genesis, that idea of serpent is a close cognate of that Hebrew idea of shimmering and shining. That it's not like Eve saw the serpent and was just disgusted. Like, there was something that caught her eye. And even in that promise, I've talked about in the past, and I don't know if you'd agree or not, but it's one of the hardest things about a smartphone to me is it's trying to convince you that the omni qualities of God can be true about you.
100%.
And we don't embrace our limitations.
Yeah.
And we get to a really unhealthy spot as humans when we don't embrace our limitations.
Yeah. And we also don't follow. So the example of Jesus is always a laying down of power and a laying down of influence, right? Like, that's the example he calls us to and sets down for us. And social media is shaped toward and shapes its users toward an empowering of self, right? I can take down that person with my words, maybe, or I can put up a really cute, like, you're always putting up cute pictures of yourself. Or even if I veer into, some girls will tell me, like, we hated this, and so we tried to be really authentic and put up all the garbage about ourselves. But even that, in a twisted way, is about us, right?
That's right.
It's still about us and about how crappy I feel, and could you please comfort me? Or, it's very much about us. You'd have to be very intentional. And I'm not saying it can't be done, because I've seen it done, but I think you have to be very wise and intentional to actually use social media to point glory to God, because it wants to point the glory to you.
Yeah. You mentioned a second ago, I want to follow up on girls you've talked to that want to get off but can't. The societal stats on anxiety, depression, that's all pretty well documented. But what are you seeing in real time? Like, when these young girls are expressing this to you, like, what are the words they're using? What are they feeling? Because there may be a lot of parents that, honestly, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. A device is a pretty good babysitter sometimes. And we may not even be, as parents, in tune with what's actually happening. Do you have a pulse on that?
What strikes me over and over again is the emotions. There is like an emotional, if you ask a young girl to get off, it is it's not logical, because she can oftentimes explain to you logically, and girls are better, in my experience, at seeing this even than boys with video games. Boys with video games have a hard time even seeing why playing for 16 hours a day would be a problem.
Well, we're just kind of dudes.
Yeah, it's true. And so, but girls they can see it. They know they don't feel good. They can explain it to you logically. And yet when it comes to getting off, there is I don't know if it's the tug for community, right? Like, I don't want to leave this. Would I have any friends? Or that, like, everybody else is doing it. Or there's like that emotion. They are emotionally involved. And so when you try to talk to them about coming off, they might be able to agree, but then not be able to do it. Oftentimes they tell me that to get off, they need a kick, right? Like a bad breakup with a boyfriend and they don't want to see him anymore, or a fight with a friend and they don't want to be on there anymore. Or just like something happens. One girl's like, I watched 3 of my friends, she was in college, like 3 of her friends got engaged over Christmas and she wasn't dating anyone. So she's like, I got to get off. Like, there's usually a kick that gets them off. And then it can be hard for them to stay off even then, because their friends are there.
Yeah, well, that kind of gets to, and we're going to wrap this up in a second and then do a part 2 on how do we pragmatically engage in this. But I talked to our mutual friend, Jason Seville, not too long ago about this idea of friendship and the reality of, like, Jesus being incarnated has to mean something. And at some level, and I'm not out here to just, totally dismiss all of social. It's not that it can't be used for redemptive purposes, but the reality is embodied relationships are, I think, the way we're designed to encounter one another.
Yeah.
And everything else, it can be good and helpful, but at some level, it's a counterfeit representation that never hits at that idea of an embodied reality.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the numbers, I think, would bear that out as well. The Gen Z is the loneliest generation. And this is across, like boys and girls across developed nations across the world. If you watch their self-reported loneliness, it spikes with the use of social media and smartphones. Mm-hmm. And so they are reporting increasing loneliness, which you would think from the most connected generation in the world, you wouldn't see. So I think those numbers are exactly supporting what you are saying, Jamie. Like there is something good and real about embodied friendship, and it is not being replicated online.
It's not, and we need to figure out what to do about it, and that's part 2.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Hey, thanks a lot for your time, and look forward to talking to you again.
All right, thank you.